Hello guys, it's Calypsia here, and today I am going back on what I said from months ago. I said in the comment of this video, I wrote a paper on this manga because of this playlist. And people were saying like, post the paper and stuff like that. I just posted the paper, it would not do it justice. You know. So anyway, the manga is The Summer Hikaru Died. Okay. This is like a manga, I think it's like 6 volumes or something now. So it's, yeah, not that long. I think back when I wrote the paper, I only read like the first 15 chapters or something when I actually wrote it. And the paper I wrote about was only about the 2 first volumes. So I wrote this paper for this class. It's like, I'm an English ed major, but for terms of not saying English ed every time, I'm just going to say English major since they're almost the same thing. One just has a different focus than another. But anyway, I would have felt like my senior capstone. You can basically think of it like a senior thesis, but it's a paper you're supposed to work like all semester on. So yeah, I took this class and I wrote my final paper for my major on it. So the paper was like 20 pages or something like that. Anyway, it was a very hard paper, but I have written paper on my own interest before. Like, I wrote a paper on Amori in Monster High, and now I know you're thinking, like, what the heck? Like, that is the most obscure, weirdest topics. Are you, like, 5 years old? And I would say, yeah. I am, like, a 12-year-old in my brain. So I wrote about whatever the hell I want. And I actually got a good grade on both of them. Okay, they're over kind of similar topics. The Monster High paper was kind of bad, but I did write a paper over whatever I wanted, and I got away with it. Same with this class. I asked the professor, can I write a paper over this? And I showed him the book and everything, and he looked through the book, and he said, yeah, and you could do it on this, that, and blah, 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 blah. So, I wrote the paper. Okay, so this is the paper right here. And I'm just going to show it the version history. Okay, so it went through many steps. Okay. So just a disclaimer, this is not a video essay, okay? There are a lot of great video essays on A Summer Hikaru Died. Now, would I ever watch them? No. Because I wrote a paper over it, and I have my own thoughts about the manga. These are weird thoughts. Like, these are not thoughts you're going to get from those video essays. You're going to be like, what the heck? But the class I took about, it was about plants. And like how plants are used in fiction. So basically that's what the paper is about. Let me close the door because my cat is screaming in the other room. Okay, so tip number 1. When you write a paper, you need to get feedback on it. If I did not get feedback on this paper would be a complete failure. Because without the professor, this paper, oh my god, he gave me so many ideas. Now, this is, like, completely dependent on your university. Like, the university that I go to. You're going to see the name on the screen. I'm not going to say it out loud. There's, like, a bunch of students that go to it. I also show my real name on the screen, but I have a very common name, so it doesn't really matter. But, like, depending on your university, like, if you go to the professor, go to them, because they are the expert in their field. They're the reason why I'm taking their class. And so they know how to improve parts of your paper. Don't be afraid to get feedback, especially that, like, if you don't have to turn it, like, if you have time before you have to turn it in, they are the ones that grade your paper, and they can tell you, like, things you can work on. So that really helped me with my paper. Okay, so for this paper, I had the whole semester. I really only worked, like, 2 months on it because I didn't really have time to work on the paper. I worked full-time at the time, so I was more like, I was scrambling to get everything together. But there's, like, many steps to this paper. So this is, like, one of the very last steps, actually drafting it. But basically, like, what I'm trying to show you here for the version history is the paper. Like, first I'm going to create an outline. If you write a paper without an outline, you are absolutely crazy. Also, tip number 2, do not spend 1 day on a paper. Don't even spend 2 days on a paper. If you have a lot of time for the paper and you know that you have a lot of time on the paper, you better pace yourself because There is no way you're gonna write a good paper in one day. And I don't care what people tell you, okay? I've heard people say all the time that this paper I wrote was so good, like I wrote it in one day. If you give that paper to me, I will call it bad, okay? As an English ed major, like, I am very, like, selective when I read stuff, and so I know what is good and bad. And everything good that I've written is something that's been well researched, you know? Like, time has been spent on it. So, like, if you have time to work in a paper, definitely plan it out well. Like, I have this outline here, so I just use the outline to write each section of the paper. Now, obviously, this changed over time. Like, some sections I removed, blah, blah, blah. Like, right here, this was like a brain fart. I just wrote random stuff down. And, yeah. So, like, yeah. But, like, obviously, to get all these words, like fungal, queer theory, eco-horror, I had, like, keywords on it. So, I searched up, like, the manga. And I read some discourse on it. Now, what is discourse? Basically, discourse is watching videos like this. Seeing what people read in the comments. What is it like? It's horror. Oh, it's BL. Oh, blah. This person saying a corpse. Ooh, nostalgia. That's a keyword right there. Basically, just reading discourse over it, and you can also make up your own keywords. Like if you read like a short story and thinking like, oh, this story talks about a lot about feminism or something like that. That could be like a keyword. So you just research your keyword. You read like papers associated with that keyword. Like right here, I searched just some of Hikaru, right? Nothing popped up. And some of the keywords I use is eco-horror. Usually I use Google Scholar for this kind of stuff. One of the best things, honestly, to use for research, people will disagree with me on this, but you can see the two authors right here, Stephen Rust and Something Souls. You literally get the link to the PDF. Usually it does work when it says PDF in the corner. You can literally click on it, get access to it. It gives you the format that you need for your work cited. So use Google Scholar. Now you're forced to use like something like EBSCOhost, JSTOR. Yes, those are good too, but Google Scholar has the biggest range of items to select from. So some of those things you're getting from JSTOR, etc., will be on those websites. Like right here, I've accessed something like this. I think I did read this article a very long time ago. Not trying to see what it said, but yeah, okay. But anyway, yeah, so that's, yeah, search up your keywords first so you can get the ideas for the outline. Then do all your research. The research honestly took me forever. Like, I had 6 sources, and I read 2, it's like secondary sources, and I had to read the actual manga for some of Hikaru died, so that took a long time. But basically, like, when you find articles, I would just read, like, the first, like, 2 pages. And if you're not vibing with it, don't use it. Like, this one, it's not showing it, so I'll use this one. So I'm reading it, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this one's talking about planetary eco-horror and some light annihilation. Probably don't know what either of those words are. I do, but this one's talking about, okay, it's from eco-horror is... blah, blah, it's the definition. Okay, skimming really quickly. Okay, post-human, that's the keyword right there that you could use. It's describing it more. And then it's describing, like, this research, basically. Okay, so if you're vibing with it, then use it for your paper. Basically, and then, what I like to do with that, like, I like to have, like, a document where, like, I copy and paste random stuff off the thing, like, okay, that was from this, so I'll just do, like, an example right here, notepad. So I'll just say, like, blah, blah, I'm just copying this random stuff. And I'm going to copy and paste, like, the link or something. And then go back to it later. Because if you see something good, you can use a free paper later. Let's X that out. Okay, so I did all the research and all that stuff, and that's how I got the outline, basically. So this is basically the summary of my research and what I'm going to use to support my thesis. The thesis, it wasn't even done yet by the time I wrote this on April 18th. I said, the summary of Hikaru diet discusses the hybridity between fungi and human beings. I basically made it one sentence. The thesis is like basically what your paper is going to talk about. So I definitely changed it over time. So you can see me, yada yada. I've been working every day on it, etc. etc. A thing that I noticed after like reading my versions, I started in the middle of the paper when I first wrote it. So like, don't be afraid to start in the middle of the paper, because sometimes starting in the body is like easier than actually starting from the beginning. Because the introduction, I really struggled with it for this paper. It was a horrible introduction, honestly, but it met the requirements of what the professor asked for, so I just did what I could. Kept writing. I wrote like a paragraph a day or something, I think. And I paced myself out really well, so even though I didn't have that much time to work on it since I was working full time, it wasn't too overwhelming, because I knew some sections are better than others, but at least I knew that the stuff was down there, so you see me editing it constantly. This may be something that people might disagree with. Honestly, I just edit as I write, and that's kind of bit me in the butt many times, but yeah, as you can see me, I'm like quoting stuff, editing what I'm erasing, making sure it sounds good, and then more stuff, so you can see right here. Oh, I'm formatting it. Yeah, and then I'm writing more stuff. Yeah, I see I have my section names and stuff like that right here. Okay, wait, let me see what happened. May 8th, I'm still working on it. Basically, I was just like getting the grammar done, so like I try to reread the thing. Usually, it helps when I have like something read it out loud to me, so I can get like all the grammar mistakes away. Which is kind of weird because like this paper, it had so many grammar mistakes. It's actually embarrassing that I turned it in. Like, I'm reading it now and I'm like, oh my god, like some parts could have been so much better. But the point of this video is not a video essay, but it's showing you how I wrote the paper and what the paper is about. Okay, so basically I'm just gonna talk about the paper now. Okay, so the title of the paper, It Ain't Dirty or Anything. This is a reference to chapter 8. I think that's what, I do talk about it in the paper later, but something that Hikaru says about his insides. It was kind of, I'm not sure if that's actually from the official translation or not. I think the unofficial one said something else. I'm not sure. This is a weird thing to kind of, also like what you pick can be kind of weird, because especially something like this, it's a manga, so like if you don't have experience, which honestly I don't have that much experience reading manga, it can be very difficult. New things you learn every day. Especially for something like this. There wasn't that many translations out when I wrote this. I wrote this like in April 2024. So, yeah, I had to buy the actual book. So I do have it on my bookshelf right now. But I was flipping through the book usually. And then I also bought the online version so I could read it like on the go or something like that. So basically I start my paper with the title. And then I talk about my key terms in my introduction. So the introduction should summarize what your key terms are and what you're going to talk about later. So basically I talked about queer theory. So I talked about this one book. I only read like the first like 2 chapters, but Mel Chen, they are like this professor, so intelligent, it's actually mind-baffling. But they talk about queer theory. Now, see, the thing is that my issue when people call The Summer of Hikaru Died a BL manga is that it's not really BL when you think about it, since the monster thing, I'm going to call it fungal body in the paper, fungal thing, is not really a male. My cat just made me open a new tab. Is not really like a I need to start more sentence. The issue when people call this a BL manga is that it's not really BL. Like the monster / fungal body, which is what I call it in the paper, is not really a male. So how can it be boys love if the monster isn't really a boy? It doesn't really have a gender, even though maybe you could argue that it's gendered. I don't really know. It's just weird when people say you should read it because it's a BL manga. That is not the reason why you should really read this, in my opinion, but okay. Like, I really think more of it like a gay monster is likes a human. That's what I think about it. even if maybe not even gay monster. You see, even I'm correcting myself. A monster likes a human, but it's weird because it's actually like a talking corpse of a human who looks like a boy. So I understand people call it BL, not the most accurate. Basically, I'm just describing what queer is in this context, which Melton explains it as like living alternate forms of things. So I think his like, I don't know. I read like this one chapter and it's about like this girl in her photograph, and it was like the body being queer was like the rock. So it's just showing how like queerness can come out of things that are not comes out of things that are not human, and then you like that thing even though it's not like human. I don't know if I described that well at all. Yeah, I talk about it here about the photograph. So let's talk about the melting of binary boundaries, which is something that perfectly summarizes the sum of Hikaru dies. So anyway, I talk more about that, and then I introduce another term. This is honestly a bad transition here. I talk about queerness, right? And then I move to eco horror. I should have connected the queerness to eco horror. I guess that it's part of this chaos is eco horror. I should have said maybe part of this queerness can be eco horror. Again, not for paper, but I'm just revising it in my head. This is something you should always be doing when you're writing a paper, like tip number 4. Revise as you write. Think about ways you can always rephrase stuff, because the first way that you write it is usually not the best way. Like, each sentence in this paper has so many revisions. Like, the first time I wrote it, I thought it was good. Come back to it a day later, it was bad. Rewrote it. Came back to a week later, it was bad. Rewrote it. So, yes, the paper is going to have lots of revisions. Always think about a way you can say it better. So I talk about eco-horror. Eco-horror is basically like the environment. The environment can be plants, animals. Fighting back becomes horrific. Most classic example, Day of the Triffids. That's something that we read in this class, since the class I talk about plants. So basically plants, these triffids were attacking humans. They like shot poison at them, and it made them blind, stuff like that. Anyway, I talk about eco-horror and how this will relate to what I'm talking about later. So I talk about queerness, and I talk about eco-horror, and then I talk about like things that relate to this eco-horror, like films, narratives that talk about eco-horror. Basically how eco-horror can be important. So first let's start with some short stories. House of Usher. If you probably read it and be like, what the heck, how is that queer? Just read the thing, honestly. There's so many papers on it, and whatever I say about it will not do it justice. Then Godzilla. Also, this one's more easier to understand because people are testing bombs in the ocean. And now a big monster is happening, and now it's stepping all over Tokyo. So, I talk about how one is textural and one is visual. And then I introduce how manga uses text and visuals to show this eco-horror thing. So basically, I just had this manga section because, like, my professor was like, here, have this big book, these 2 big-ass books, and start reading them. Because it might help for your paper. It might give you some ideas. So I put it in the paper. So I gave some examples in the manga world. Since The Summer of Hikaru is a manga, it is combining visual and text, and it's different than these main 2, which are also products of eco-horror. So I just described Azumaki. I'm not sure if I said it right. Which, by the way, the anime came out. The animation looks terrible in episode 1. But I just talk about like Katayama, which is in the anime. It's the snail dude. Hopefully they do him justice because he's basically the biggest example of eco-horror. Eco-horror in Azumaki is kind of weird because basically it's like talking about... I talked about how like the Anthropocene, that's like basically like the world that humans have created, and how like us perceiving the spiral, which is part of nature, and how that becomes like horrific. So it's kind of, it's like I'm basically talking about like how nature and humans like intertwine to create horrific things, even if the spiral itself isn't really like horrifying. Don't know if that made any sense, but yeah, I talk about that. And then I talk about Asano's Ninja holograph. This is not the best example, but it is an example because it shows, if you have read it, if you have not, it doesn't really matter, but it talks about this, I think, group of like 5 people and their lives and the trauma that they go to. But it, like in that, Ikuhara operates in the act of the butterfly. The butterfly is supposed to represent like the healing maybe of the human, because it, like, butterflies pop up all over the manga. So I'm trying to show like eco horror as like representing the human mindset, you know. Apparently I still identify it incorrectly. I'm not gonna correct that. So then I just talk about how like these two mangas I talk about the animal side of eco horror. So now I'm showing the gap. So the paper is about showing the gap in the research and how I'm going to go into that gap. So the gap is how plants interact with humans. So then I talk about more about plants. I talk about this writing from Catarona Sandylands. If I said her name wrong, if you're here, I'm sorry. But she writes a lot of really interesting stuff about plants and her interaction with plant culture. And basically I just talk about like plants and humans and like interaction that isn't necessarily like deadly, but maybe like maybe not harmonious, but just intersecting, I think that's what I mean. So I talk about how like the summer Hikaru dies, let's talk about this intersection. And I describe it a little bit, like kind of like a brief summary of the manga. So then here's my thesis, which I eventually developed into. Thus, I argue that interactions between Hikaru, Yoshiki, and their environment use eco-horror and the queer to describe the weird relationship between human and fungal bodies. That is a very long sentence, but I'm using the keywords to talk about eco-horror and queer to discuss how I'm going to talk about the weird and fungal, which I do describe in the very first section. The first section basically operates in establishing some more keywords, but also getting into what the manga is about. Basically, in the body, you should be breaking down and using like your analysis skills of the data or whatever you have. So here I'm like breaking down the manga panel, which I'm talking about like the text and how that can be used in a way to show like the chaos. So here I show a manga panel right here, and it shows how like his thoughts are interlapping. I like summarize. I'm so grossed out. I'm so scared. It's already dead. I'm talking about how he feels about Hikaru, but he kind of keeps it to himself, which is a grammar mistake right now. I'll just fix it. I talk about how like he feels this way about Hikaru, but he's not really sure how to tell him, you know. But I also say like this only happens when Hikaru shows his true self, since he doesn't really say anything unless Hikaru shows that he is this thing that isn't quite human. Because I think after they go to the ice cream shop, he's like, I guess you know about me, and then he shows like the tentacles coming out of his head and stuff like that. Then I talk more about that. And then I talk about how Yoshiki does know about Hikaru is dead. And talking about like the fear of like dead bodies coming back to life. And then the past compared to the present. This transition maybe could have been better, but I talk about like fungi. Like I'm trying to make a distinction between plant and fungi. So I talk about how like this new body, like this dead body come to life is parasite secretion, accumulation of moisture, negative ontologity. Basically I think the ability to reproduce, something like that. And the incomplete plant. So like fungi is kind of like this alternate version of what we don't really know about. And that's what Hikaru, this new version of Hikaru, represents. So I just describe more about how like more about the fungal features that Hikaru shares throughout the manga. So my next section, I talk more about like the queerness. Maybe this is the part you guys are interested in. But how like the queerness is seen in an alternate version of what we expect a sexual interaction to be like. So I talk about the scene at the very end of Volume 1, and I think they're like in the gym room. I think like Hikaru brings them there, and then like Hikaru's like, stick your hands on my body. And so like Shiko's like, okay. Yes, like Yoshiki is like, okay, I do that. So I kind of break down that scene a little bit. I show like a scene from it, what's inside. So it's definitely different than what you would think it does look like, you know? And I talk about how this kind of acts, kind of like penetration, but not really. It's very weird because it's not what we expect, but it's also queer since it looks like it's like an interaction between a guy and a guy, but it's not really. You know, it's this fungal body thing. Somebody, the human is sticking his hand in it, and it feels like good. But we see that Yoshiki does feel afraid, or he thinks he should feel afraid of this, of this feeling. So then I also introduced like another scholar, Alison Sperling, and she talks a lot about weirdness, and about like how like weirdness is just like the oddities, and how like Yoshiko feels weird about it. I mean, it says earlier in the panel that I showed earlier, it feels weird. So I talk about that. And then I also talk about the title of the paper is. It ain't dirty or anything. Like, sex is kind of seen like as a dirty act, right? But, yeah, like Hikaru says, it ain't dirty or anything. Basically encouraging the act, like saying that what we're doing, this queerness, is actually a good thing for the both of us. Like, it's not dirty. There won't be a mark on you. Nobody will know. That kind of aspect. I didn't actually say that in the paper, actually. That would have been a cool thing if I said that. But, yeah. So I'm just describing what weirdness and queerness is, and then I start through a different example. So definitely in paper, you need to have a lot of examples that you can work on with your own individual thoughts. You should be repeating your thesis, but also developing it. So I'm saying how the relationships are developing, but I'm not saying this is developing, it keeps developing. I'm talking about how it is doing it rather than it just doing what, like how. So I talk about how even though like Yoshiki thinks it's weird that he stuck his hand in the body, he keeps thinking about it, which means it does feel good. And I think there is a scene and he says like, it feels good. Like this is weird, but it feels good. So I talk about how like Yoshiko keeps thinking of him putting the hand in the body, kind of like putting your hand like on chicken, and kind of how he just uses that weird interaction as an act of like queerness. So Sperling, I quoted, it can make things felt in the body that would not be understood otherwise, like visceral. So, yeah. It is queerness that places unfamiliarity as familiar for Yoshiko. So I'm talking about how like the interaction that they have at the very end of Volume 1 is starting to make queerness almost a welcome thing, even though it is in this weird alternate context. Okay, so my third section, basically, it's just talking about like the deadness, which I kind of introduced earlier, like I'm talking about how like the present and the past is what Yoshiki is grappling with. So, basically I'm talking about like how Yoshiki is beginning to interpret this body as something else, since Hikaru is constantly showing the inside of his body, the tentacles, the very like fungal tentacles, the growth toward the ceiling. It's like this alternate form, and it's not really Hikaru anymore because we don't normally show the inside of our body. Like he is showing. When Hikaru shows the inside, he's being very vulnerable. Just something that Yoshiki has never seen before. So then I just talk about how Yoshiki kind of eventually just separates this kind of like alternate inside-outside form. So that's right here. And that's like more about like how the fungal is kind of like interrupting here. Like it's almost like a little bit parasitic because you see that this is this is kind of it's like an alternate version of sticking the hand in the body. Hikaru is like initiating it this time, and he's putting his tentacle inside Yoshiki's body, so it's kind of like that parasitic thing. And then we also see like the splurt, like the sound, like the liquid. It's like an alternate version of saliva. So the inside becoming the outside becomes so much more obvious when you're not just seeing it, but you're touching it too. Yeah, and then I mentioned something I said earlier. It feels so gross, but then it feels so good. Like he doesn't completely hate that this thing is sucking on him because it feels good. And Sperling says something, it somehow felt right. So it's just part of this queerness that Yoshiki is developing into that he already knows. Like he has tried to feel it before with the original Hikaru, but now he's getting to know it even if it's not in the context that he expected. So then this part of the paper, the last section, is so horrible. Like I literally ran out of steam. Like I did not know what to make the paper about. The last part of the paper is so bad. Like I literally ran out of steam. I was like, I do not know what to make the paper about, so I just took something random that my professor said looked cool. So I just made that two-section paper because that had 15 pages, and I was on page 13. So wait, actually, I think it'd be 12 to 15. So technically, I met the requirement. But anyway, last section, not the best section, but I'm gonna try to explain the best I can. I talk about how other fungal bodies like are different than Hikaru's body. I keep calling the fungal thing Hikaru, but that doesn't really make sense unless it's like in writing. But anyway, I'm talking about like other fungal bodies are not really welcome and how the queer relationship between Hikaru and Yoshiki is eventually strengthened. So I showed this like this weird wig thingy. It kind of looks bodily, like it looks like hair, but it's part of the same like fungal creature that Hikaru is part of. So I show how like this thing of matter is getting like its own like definitions within the scene. Like the sister thinks it's hair, but it's actually this monster, and it's becoming to matter when it's on me, when it's invading, you know. Like if it was part of hair, because hair is all over the floor and stuff like that, right? But it's this matter becoming this fungal creature that becomes so disturbing, I don't know if they even made it. I'm not sure what I even wrote here. This is word blob. Like it's not good, but I think I somewhat said that originally. Then I talk about like when Yoshiki's in the water and he goes like in the dream. He sees like this brain monster and how like it's again going back to like the third section, the inside outside, and he's seeing that brain. The brain is trying to scare him, thinking you're just your inside, like you're not a person. Basically. Like you're a body, but you don't have the ability to like move yourself. But then like in the middle of these thoughts, like Hikaru saves Yoshiki kind of, but not really, because Yoshiki like bites Hikaru, like this other fungal body that saves him. So he's like making like a difference between like, even though like I'm staring at a monster right now, I'm with the monster that will help me, that helps me realize that I'm more than just this body, I'm actually a person. So basically my conclusion, how the manga talks about eco-horror and core elements, explore the potential. This paper like talks about like the evolution, keeps evolving, but eventually like Yoshiko begins to rely on Hikaru, and so even though this is wrong right here, oh my god, so embarrassing. But I talk about how like eventually like I think my cat just deleted the last sentence of my paper. She jumped on my thing and now it's, oh well. I'm just gonna restore the version later anyway. But that annoys me. I don't know what I wrote. So it's like talking about how like lost my train of thought now. What was I trying to say? I talk about how like the human and the fungal come together in this weird relationship and how it may evolve in the future. So I show the last scene of this. Even though like before Hikaru was invading Yoshiko's body, now it's the other way around. So we see this kind of like equivalent relationship. So that's my paper. I quoted lots of stuff. Some of it was good, some of it was bad. But that's how I did it. This is my whole research paper that I did on this. I wrote about this and I think I got like a 95. My professor told me that there are some parts that I could have done better. You read this one article. Honestly, a manga or comic book that is similar to this. It's a weird thing. They actually make a reference to it in the Sword Art Card in the third volume. It's called a Swamp Thing. It's kind of like in the same like vein as Hikaru and Yoshiki because this plant thing, the swamp thing, is in love with a human. Now, I know it looks like a masculine, but technically, like, the graphic novel does make the distinction that it's not really a human anymore, but it does have human memories. Something like that. But the manga does reference it, and there's, like, a paper associated with it that shows, it talks more about, like, the interaction between the queer, like, the human and, like, alternate forms. I don't know. I could have put that in my paper, it probably would have been better. I would have to remove the last section. But, yeah, that's basically it. So basically what I'm trying to show you here is that you can write something good. Like, if you put your time into it. That's why I hate it when people say, like, I'm not good at writing, or writing is pointless, or it's useless, because writing is so hard. Like, it is so freaking hard. Like, I have so much stress over it every single day. I am always stressing about writing. But it's like it is a skill we are taught, in like first grade or whatever. I don't know what we're talking about writing, but writing is like how you show your brain to everybody. Like you want to show that your love is complex and deep and that you studied it well. You're trying to show that you're smart. So, like why use AI or something to write something when you want to show that you have the ability to care. Now I know some people are like, well, school doesn't matter. Why should I care about writing? Well, I mean, you read every day. I mean, you're reading signs and everything. You're reading discourse online, which is the comment section. This is the discourse right here. The ones that are liked, it's showing people writing, showing their thoughts. So, like, if you don't develop the skill of how to write, or maybe more how to care about something to that point, then how will you ever be able to show your thoughts in this concrete form that everybody can understand? Since writing is just so universal. So anyway, I'm glad you guys have listened to my rant. I actually had to re-record this because I messed up the recording. So maybe the first time I explained it was better. I don't really know. But I'm glad I got to share with you because there are, like, this professor, honestly, great professor. He's probably watching this video and be like, oh my god, thanks, Emily. But he helped me so much. His classes are I took 2 classes with him. Excellent classes, honestly. I got to write about whatever I wanted. That's because he gave me the chance. But sometimes you can only get that chance if you approach your professor, because I talked to the professor about it. Like, I had a conference with him for both times I wrote my papers, and he let me do whatever I wanted. So, like last tip, like, write about something you care about. Like, why would you write about something you don't care about? Like, it should come from your own brain. You're not just recalling it. There's a thing, it's called, like, Bloom's taxonomy. And it's, like, these skills. So, we're not just, like, remembering it when we write the paper. We're creating it. We're on that final, like, the final step. And we should be creating things from our own brain. We should be evaluating and analyzing. We're not just saying, teacher wants to hear. No, we're creating our own thoughts. We're creating our own abilities. And just like I really love this manga, I'm going through a transformative experience. Like, I'm using what I'm learning in class, and I'm putting it outside in my own paper. Even though this paper is for school, I'm still using what I've learned to apply what I've said in what I'm reading. So a transformative experience is basically like using whatever you learn outside of class, using what you learn inside class, sorry, and then using outside of class. So I just did that with this, and I continue to use it when I read stuff, you know. So the paper can be the best like educational experience, but it just depends what you make it, you know. Like honestly, like you would not expect like a paper like this or any of the papers I've written before to even be successful, but they are because I'm showing what I'm experiencing through a coherent manner that the teacher can obviously see that I care about. So anyway, for anybody who's writing a paper right now, anything hard, as long as you care about it and you go over it with such detail, which I obviously did not do for mine, as long as you care about it, you will do well. Like, I want everybody to love writing because, I mean, it can be a beautiful thing once you know how to do it in ability in the way that you are confident on. Anyway, thank you for watching and have a nice day. Bye.